Hello and welcome to Legal Thinking with myself, Ed Wootton, and my co-host, Liam Pape.
Hi.
Hopefully everyone listening hasn't kind of melted this week. How about you, Liam?
I unfortunately have, many times over.
Okay, so speaking from a puddle on the floor is my co-host. This week we are talking about birth trauma, because whilst having a baby is obviously a wonderful and life-changing experience, unfortunately sometimes it can be life-changing for the wrong reasons and quite traumatic, as members of our medical negligence team find with their clients. And you've been having a chat with one of them, haven't you, Liam?
I have indeed. I've been speaking to Hannah Blackwell, who's a senior associate at RWK Goodman, about some of the things that were covered in last year's What About Mum report, why the report was needed, and what's changed since the report was released.
Great, let's roll the tape.
Let's roll tape. It's been just over a year since Hannah and the team launched their What About Mum report into maternal health. So, Hannah, what are some of the things that were covered in this report?
So we were looking at, firstly, how well informed and prepared mums were for giving birth, and how well supported they were, how supported they were during and after giving birth.
And why did you guys feel like the report was needed?
I think it was needed because certainly from my experience of talking to my clients, there were common themes with what they were saying to me. So the focus for them tended to be very much on the baby. They got that impression from society's expectations, healthcare professionals, rather than on them. And lots of clients would say to me, I was struggling, but I didn't know if that was normal. I didn't know what to expect, and I didn't know where to turn. A lot of them would talk about fear of asking for help and stigma and discrimination. I think society generally places quite high expectations on new mums, and that can be quite damaging.
And what was one of the biggest takeaways from the report? And was there anything in there that you didn't necessarily expect before writing it?
I think probably one of the biggest things that stood out for me was that 1/3 of mums didn't feel adequately prepared for childbirth. In legal context, we talk about the need for mums to give informed consent, and there's been a lot of work around that. So it surprised me that mums weren't getting the information they need and didn't feel prepared. I think there's a lot of evidence to say that if a mum is informed and mum feels prepared for childbirth, then, the outcomes and her probably experience in terms of her mental health is going to be more positive. So, that I found quite shocking, really.
And arguably the pressure on the NHS over the last year has only got kind of heavier and worse due to, global pandemics. So what have you seen since then in terms of maternal health? So since the release of the report this time last year? Yeah,
I think sadly I've seen quite similar themes continuing. I think clients are still telling me that they feel isolated, didn't feel listened to, they felt traumatized by their experiences. And I think actually just this week for Birth Trauma Awareness Week, the Birth Trauma Association joined with Birth Better and did a survey, and they found that 84% of their respondents who had physical injuries following birth said that it impacted upon their self-esteem and body confidence. So I think some of the themes that we were aware of when we did our study are still continuing. And obviously, since we did our study, we've seen the Ockenden review, which, revealed the horrible stories of what happened at Shrewsbury and Telford. So there is clearly still a lot to be done. I think on a more positive front, the NHS long-term plan has renewed the NHS's commitment to improve specialist perinatal mental health services to ensure that all women who can benefit are able to access care. And they've included in that a commitment to develop and implement maternal mental health services in every area of the country by 2023 to 2024. So there is positive news on the horizon. I think what we're seeing as well at the moment is the impact of the pandemic. Women were having to, give birth alone, which would have been more traumatic and has caused its own problems. I think the pandemic generally has impacted on on people's mental health, and we have a bit of a nationwide crisis following that. But we are more aware of it. I think we're more aware of the impact on mental health, and what I have come across since we launched our campaign is some really good charities committed to improving these issues. So I think there is positive work being done.
And you touched upon it a little bit there, but what more does need to be done to help women's mental health following a traumatic birth?
I think we have to recognise the barriers that women face in accessing help. So I think this is multifactorial and often linked to socioeconomic factors, as well as standalone issues like racial inequality in healthcare. And it's well known that there are better outcomes for mothers and babies who obtain support. But I think there's still the difficulty with overcoming fears of discrimination and stigma in accessing support. So, as I was saying earlier, I think the expectations society places on the new mum are really high. And what we've been trying to do through our What About Mum Instagram page is talk about some of these issues and mum stories to try and break some of that stigma, and stop the high expectations that society can sometimes have on mums.
And if women don't feel like they're getting the professional support they need, where can they go?
Well, I think the first port of call should always be a healthcare professional. So they should try talking to their midwife or their GP. And then if they still don't feel they're getting adequate support, and maternal mental health services are stretched at the moment, there are some very good maternal mental health resources out there. So there's a number of charities at Birth Trauma Association, Pandas UK, Mind, Perinatal Mental Health Partnership, and MASIC, who support women who have suffered obstetric anal sphincter injuries following childbirth.
Hannah, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Yeah, so some fantastic information there from Hannah, not only on the What About Mum campaign, which you can find out about more by searching hashtag What About Mum on either Twitter or Instagram or whatever social media you use, if it's there. But also practical advice for mums who might have experienced birth trauma.
Indeed, I think it'll be interesting catching up with Hannah in another year, so 2 years after the initial report came out, to see if things have got any better.
Yep, absolutely. And if you actually want to read the report itself, make sure to go to rwkgoodman.com/whataboutmum, all one word. Otherwise, make sure to like, subscribe, give us a rating. Make sure to follow the podcast for more legal thinking. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.